understanding of this whole piece as like a very philosophical demeanor, you know, of Beethoven's. First of all, of course, it's very ambitious musically and historically, because we know that Beethoven not only kind of invented romanticism, but more than that, he always went to the piano, the piano builder, and just asked him to, you know, add more octaves, add more sound. You know, I can just imagine. I think that's something we do probably still today in electronic music, for instance. You know, you always have new machines coming out. It was exactly the same thing. So he just went to the guy, yeah, it sounds like shit, just, you know, do something better. And he just pushed him. Of course, it's a parody what I'm saying, but I mean, that's basically what he did. And this sonata with this title, that's you know, not very common for Beethoven. So he really said it's a big sonata. First of all, it's a big sonata for the hammer piano. So he really wanted it to really be like, you know, it's for the hammer. And also we have to know that Beethoven said himself that, you know, I just composed something that will give a lot of work to the pianists in 50 years. He knew that he was really leaving something for the posterity. Like I remember last time we talked about these sonatas, I think it was 9 and 10, no? It was
Yes.
2 little sonatas from the early days of Beethoven, and this ambition was just not there at all. And that's something you see more and more throughout his whole catalogue of sonatas. Like later, especially, I think there are, of course, some milestones. You can already see some of it in like the sonatas number 7 or 8, so Pathétique, you know, and the one before. And then, you know, more and more, of course, with like Appassionata, Waldstein, that's already like, it's amazing sonatas. But he didn't go so far, you know, to really transform the piano solo into a symphony. In Hammerklavier, it's really a symphonic way of writing for piano. And somebody who took really his who took this into his way of writing later, it was probably Liszt. I think a lot at least. Of course, Brahms as well, but I think Liszt has the most layers of it. And Liszt was actually the one who created for the first time this sonata in public, because he was a big fan of Beethoven. And that was actually not 50 years after it was written, but 18 years. It was in 1836. At least played it, and this piece was written finished, let's say, in 1818. So that's really the beginning of the last era of Beethoven, the last period of Beethoven. I just wanted to know before we begin, did you all like play this piece, like all the students, or are you about to play this piece? Like I'm talking about just like a percentage to know, you know. Do you really know this piece by heart already, or are you discovering? Like, what is the...
I think the demographic here is a lot of us are still discovering this piece. So,
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't practice it yet, or are practicing, maybe?
Yeah, a lot of us, yeah, some of us have listened to it, all of them, or practice, but maybe a lot of us don't play in public. It's just not of course, it's not a popular piece. It's a piece that, you know, you need to grow with it. So a lot of us just need to take that extra step, you know, to delve into it. So
okay, I mean,
yeah,
you're kind of into it already, because, you know, there's a difference if you didn't practice at all, or if you're into it because it's just like, are you already in the score, and did you already see, you know, how it is? Yeah, that was the question. So okay, yeah, let's say that we all know this piece, that we're practicing it, you know, which is which is important. I think, you know, when you practice this piece, when you start with this piece, the first thing to do is to really try to listen to it in a full way, to try to understand before even you start playing it, you know, to make some sense musically in your head. I think that's very important, because it's built again like a symphony, and I think somehow it's one of the pieces that not only needs you to have virtuosity, but also to play like a conductor. You need to be very clear about, how it should sound, and then try to reproduce what you have in your mind. That's very important, I think. And not the other way around, because I think it's such a difficult piece to play that we can really get lost musically if you don't have an idea before you start how more or less you want it to sound. Okay, that's, I think, it's the most important thing. And what we can do is, like, of course, listen. There's so many versions. I think question number one for this sonata, it's the tempi, because there are original tempis written by Beethoven that are impossible, almost impossible. I kind of play them in my version, in my recording, but I mean, it's a choice. I don't do it every time now when I play it. Sometimes it depends on my mood, and also, like, I think I decided to slow down a little bit, because just also it's not a recording. So when you play in the big hall at this tempo, people just don't really get it. It's just too many informations for such a small amount of time, so it's just doesn't work so well. So you have to slow it down a little bit when you play. I mean, I think that these indications, just like all the other indications, when there are indications in this time, it's more with Beethoven, it's more character. It's more character. So, if you play so fast, if you think about it, and if that's for sure a different character than if you play it's different. So I think this indication is still something you should really follow carefully. So not take it, I have to play it at 1:38, but more like, I have to play it not too heavy, basically. So there's so many heavy versions that sound great, actually, but I think if we want to try to understand really what Beethoven wanted, which is like one way to interpret it, when you play somebody else's piece, I think this indication is still important. Same thing in the other movements, of course. It's extremely, extremely fast. Also, the third movement is extremely fast. So it indicates that this third movement, it's not supposed to be something where you just get lost. I think it's something that has a lot of direction, because if you take this speed, you cannot lose the direction. Of course, you cannot play that fast. It doesn't make sense sometimes, because, it's like, don't have enough time to say everything. But still, this indication is important. In the last movement is not that fast, actually. It's fast, but it's not impossibly fast, let's say. So it's a lot less weird, when you think about it. The music in this tempo, it's less weird somehow. But especially 1 and 3, it's very important to have this in mind, and I think you should keep the character that this tempo would want. And that also influences the sound, I think, a lot. The sounds that you will have, especially in 1 and 3. I think those are the trickiest movements. Of course, 4 as well, but 4 it's a fugue. So somehow it's more in my opinion, easier to comprehend. Because a fugue is a fugue, and it has its construction. And if you played a lot of fugues and some counterpoints, it's easier to understand. But I mean, 1 and 3, it's really tricky musically. I will talk, I think, a lot about 3, because for me, the third movement is really the high point, the culmination or the summit of this sonata. And it's the longest, of course. It's like 15 minutes. So it takes a lot of the quality off if you don't play it well, let's say. No, of course, we hope that all the movements have the same quality, of course. That's ideal. One other thing I want to talk about the whole sonata. So I said, you can listen to it. That's one thing that helps. Then you should just read. Once you really have it in your mind, always listen to different versions, please. Not only mine, or not only Schnabel, or not only Sokolov or something. Just listen to a lot of versions. If possible, never stop too much on one. Maybe like don't get too used to one, because I think then you try to imitate, and that's never a good thing in anything you do musically, I think. But well, try to listen to only good versions. Just stop if it's too bad. I would say it doesn't make sense if it's too bad. Well, after you listen to it, try not to listen to it anymore and just play it in your head, really like a conductor would do. That helped me a lot, actually, when I did that, when I was like, okay, I don't have enough time. I need to put some meaning in all of this, it's just, and that helped a lot. Really, you try to imagine, what's the best version for you, and you do that with your score, and you put annotations, knowing that these annotations are very important, but you may not stick to them once you play them. Of course, you have to remain very malleable, adaptable, to just keep it easy, just take it easy as well, and don't force anything. And yeah, again, I think this is one piece where it's better that you have the time that you need to make sense out of it. If you need 3 months, you take your 3 months, and you don't plan a concert like, okay, you have to learn it for in 2.5 months. That doesn't work, I think. So just considering that, yeah, try to go through the whole thing. And try to, when I say try to imagine it in your head, it's not totally without organization. Okay, it's you have to be careful on certain things, especially the counterpoint in this piece. It's really what makes this sonata. And this counterpoint is making it symphonic. It's making it difficult also, because to play just very easily. There's so many notes that have its own meaning, its own line at the same time. So number one is to understand what's going on counterpoint wise. I think what's important, what you can do, is to kind of first what you should do in any kind of fugue. So especially in the fugue, but actually throughout this whole piece, it works to just kind of, with your crayon, you just put out, okay, here the voice is beginning, here another beginning. For instance, we have the first movement, of course, you have these two elements. And so here, okay, that's one element. And then you always have this like huge contrast with this. So what you should crayon the, and then, and this one, just crayon the beginning of each voice. Okay, it sounds very beginner, but it's very important later if you want to understand what's going on in between, all the layers. Yeah, that's very important. And that's for the first movement. The first movement, you have a fugato in the middle, so that's the kind of work that will become very clear and fast. Actually, you will do that very fast. Okay, less of course for the second movement, but for the third movement also very important. Knowing, for instance, beginning of third movement. That's just an example. And we will go more into detail for every movement. But like, if you have like, so if you do like, this is one voice, okay? You have this element. This. This is a new voice that comes. It's not, it's one thing, and this is a new thing. And this kind of things, it's everywhere in this piece, and it's very important to understand it. Or like later on in the third movement, if you have the score with you, for instance here, you have to know that it starts here, so that you don't play like, it's small, but it makes all the difference, and it's a very simple task. and you should do this throughout the piece, especially of course 1, 3, and 4, of course, because in every fugue any fugue should be practiced like this first. Like you really put out, okay, this voice starts here, this voice starts here, and that's the first thing to do. I think that's basic. If you need, in different colors, I personally, I'm quite cool with this. You can just do everything with a crayon if it's clear enough for you. If for you, like you see this, it's like, wow, it's just a lot. I don't know where to begin. Then even do this with different colors. This voice, it's this color. This voice, it's another color. And what you can do nowadays, if you have a tablet, you can download an app with this, so that if you make a mistake, you can just remove it very easily. That's also a way to do this. You don't have to spend too much money on buying 5 different complete. I actually do have that at home, but it's not the easiest to transport. Anyway, so this is the first thing to do. That's really technical kind of analysis thing, and then go into like less detailed layer, I would say, which is like the contrasting elements that you find in any kind of it's very Beethovenian. It's very Beethoven. In any representative Beethoven music, you have this kind of like red, and then like blue, or like this very like contrast thing. And that's very typical in this piece, like especially in the beginning of the first movement. It's exactly like this. You have something very like bravura like this, and then something very platonic, or almost really really platonic, and it's always 2 elements that make a whole movement. So first movement it's very clear. You have da dum da 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 dum da 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 da. That's one element. Then you have da 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 that you can find also if you see the second theme. This second theme, which is very weird if you think about it, because Mozart is really a theme. It's a theme. This is not really a theme. This is more like a development. It's just gorgeous, this way of writing, and this is basically exactly the same stuff, the same texture as the second element you find in the beginning. So you really have just these 2 elements, and just keep in mind, where you have the first element and when you have the second element, and how to make sense of this when it comes to have an idea of the structure. Okay, because if you think about the development of this piece, the first movement, for instance, in the development part, it's definitely just the first element over and over and developed, and then at some points it's joining together. And I think knowing these 2 elements, it helps you see which one goes to when is one going to another, and to construct, to put some, again, it's to put some meaning in all this. This is the second thing to do. So that in the first movement, it's very clear. I think it's really a no-brainer. In the second movement too, of course, it's really A, B, A, and that's like just one thing, but still you can go more in detail. For instance, you have like, that's one element, of course, and every time you have this thing, that's kind of one element that kind of just, cuts. You have something, and then like suddenly, boom, you have another thing. So this, every time this thing comes, this, I don't know. That's at the end, you really have also these 2 elements. Da, 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 da. Of course, and the trio, we don't talk about it, that's very classical. Same thing. So in the third movement, that's the most interesting in the third movement. I think it's philosophically always this kind of contrast between earth and heaven, or like Beethoven was not so much of he was a believer, but he was not really Christian, like in the proper sense of the term. But there is always this element of human trying to reach the heights, like the sky, if you don't want to call it heaven, and but falling down. That's kind of always, and that's something you can also find in all his late sonatas, especially in the three that come after this one. So like 30, 31, 32. There's always this. So like you go like, okay, let's find an example. Yeah, actually, that's something. Maybe it's better. It's clearer if we do that when we listen to it later, so that I can tell you exactly where, when. But yeah, basically, the two elements that we want to find in the third movement, it's really about the human on Earth, basically. And then when it goes higher, and when it tries to reach a higher ground, this actually. This, for instance, that's definitely reaching for higher ones, and then you go like higher, like. For instance, on this, it's a very long movement. It's difficult to keep a hold on it, and then it goes very high. For instance, here actually, and then it falls down again, like. These kind of things, and then you just go back down. It's always like this. It's kind of A B A B A coda, this movement. So it seems very long, but actually it's very clear how it's made, and every time you have a variation on the same themes, when it comes back. So it's always the same philosophical contrast between these two elements of high and low, really, this two. And it's very clear. And once we understand that, it gives also a different dimension, I think, to this movement, because it really wants, it's really trying to reach something higher. It's not just notes going up because it sounds good. It actually has a meaning behind without trying to put too many words on it, of course. But it's quite clear like this. Yeah, and that's one thing. And fourth movement, same thing, two elements. Of course, that's actually quite clear. So it's in the theme, in the main theme. So like, that's one thing, and then actually all the 16s, that's another thing. Yeah, and there are a lot of 16s, but actually the skeleton of the fuga is really every time you have the. For instance, this counter, how do you say in English? This counter thema, do you say that? The counter theme, this, for instance, that's the same element then. Okay, it's the same element, and then all the tega 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 tega, that's just the other elements. Just to be very simple about this. What I love about this fuga, is that he writes literally fugue in 3 voices with a few freedoms. With a few freedoms, like these few freedoms are making this piece what it is. It's like I really love it. A few liberties, like taking some liberties. Yeah, but it's still quite clear, and this it comes everywhere, even when it's like super charged, you can always, you know, come back to something very clear when you really know when the when that starts, you know. Also, like when the trills become like very present, you know. Here, for instance, here, for instance, you have like all these trills. There's a start here, for instance. Then here, yeah. This one starts, and then the left hand starts again. Here, for instance. It's very difficult to show you without a scheme, actually, because it's just, you know, that's part of the work that you should have done before. Like I told you before, you know, to put all the voices lined up, and just, you know, if you do that work well, normally all the sforzandos that you find in the last movement should also match. Not all of them, you know, but most of them match the beginning of this theme, you know, or like help it, and you will find a very, very logical explanation to everything that's written in this field. It's extremely well written. Okay, so that's kind of for the whole thing. Now we can, if you have any questions until now, maybe about the whole thing and how to build the whole thing, maybe it's the moment to ask. But then we will go to more detailed elements of each movement. What do you think, Christina? Should we do some questions now about all the movements?
We can also listen to it. Yeah, we haven't had any questions so far. So
you haven't had any questions? Perfect. So what I think we can do now, let's do this. Yeah, let's listen movement by movement, and then I go into detail. I don't know how much time we have actually all together.
You know, as long as you want. As long as you're still here, yeah.
But I mean, it's still quite long. I don't think it's necessary to do the whole thing. If you can find the second repeat of the first movement, that would be great. And then we can listen a little bit like longer until the re-exposure. If that's okay for you.
Yeah,
that would be
great. Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. Okay.
So you want do you have the link to your YouTube, or do you have it ready in your computer? Yeah.
I can find you, but you should be able to find it like this. I'm also finding it just like this. Wait, let me just a sec. Voila. I sent it in the chat. Yeah.
So we share this on screen?
Yeah, that would be cool. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the repeat should be around 2 minutes, something. 2-3 minutes. The second repeat.
Okay, so I share now, yeah?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Christine?
Yeah, you want to stop here?
Yeah. Voila. Because the whole sonata is kind of long.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think we've got everything because it repeats itself afterwards. So all the elements are here. So like I think one thing to be that's kind of like funny, not funny, yeah, interesting about this movement. It's like this da-dum, da-dum. This and actually I think this is we say like at least French people say. I don't know if they say that in Germany. Actually, Skanda can tell, but if that in German music or Germanic music, like from Austria or Germany, you can always hear the der, die, das from German. So that's the article of German. And that's, typically the upbeat, it's always as important as what comes afterwards. And that's like the beginning always starts on the upbeat. It's not like in other kinds of, yeah, actually you have music without upbeat, that's for sure, but the upbeat in German music is very important, and this is typically the case where every time the theme actually starts on the upbeat. So ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, bum. You almost never have once, if I'm not mistaken, never once where the theme comes on da 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 da. Even it's always a da 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 da. And I think especially in the fugato that I mean, it's like this fugato after the seconda volta, deuxième maison. This one, that's the fugato of the first movement. And that's so funny because it's really like, the theme always comes, like even when it gets very complicated. Like it always comes from the upbeat, and that's very important to check that, to have that in mind whenever you play this first movement, because it changes the whole picture. That's one thing. Same thing here actually. It's not. And actually, I say that I think it's quite important because I actually heard quite a lot of versions where people kind of do that, or yeah, these kind of things. It's really all the upbeats have to speak already, start to speak. Okay, that's one thing. One other thing, I think, we were talking about the tempo of this movement, and in the choice of tempo, I mean, we all have different techniques and different ways we feel comfortable, different techniques we feel more comfortable with. For some people, it will be octave. For some people, it will be, I don't know, thirds, or I don't know, precision, or playing fast or playing slow, or I don't know. Everybody has his way of playing piano the best. That's something I believe in. So like, if, and I believe that you have to keep that in mind too when you play something that's very classical and should be played a certain way. I believe there are some things, style-wise, stylish-wise, that must remain there, and we must be aware of it, and we cannot do whatever we want because it's written and it's very well written, and it doesn't make sense to do things too, not convincing or out of nowhere, let's say. But it's important in a piece so virtuosic to keep in mind, that in your way of playing, you have to try to find a tempo that you feel comfortable with. And again, that's why I was saying in the beginning that the tempo that Beethoven wrote here should be seen or understood as character tempis. So if you play it slower, I'm taking, especially in this recording, as I said before, I'm taking really a very kind of the tempo that Beethoven wanted, and that's a choice that I don't do anymore. So if you play it slower, which you probably will, it's important to keep in mind the character of it. That's very, very important, and the character also comes from the length of your notes. The the percussive way you can play the first element here, for instance, this. Yes. And then to make a really big contrast with this legatissimo here. Okay, I'm doing it a little bit more than usual, but so that you really hear the difference. And here, you have this staccato. Really have this in mind, and you have this kind of big thing where you can really put the contrast that it's most, the maximum contrast you can do, especially here. Look. These kind of things where you can, just try to play without harming the rhythm and the tempo. You can take a slower tempo, but all these details must remain intact. And I think that's how you should choose the tempo, that you have enough time to do all that, that you feel comfortable doing all that, and especially very, very important, I think, it's to have time to play a very nice legato in this first movement. I think, especially in the second theme. So like this one. Yeah. And this legato must remain super, that you have really time to say that in a very nice way, which is probably very difficult if you want to keep the 138 of Beethoven. So that's important. Other thing I would talk about, it's the, not trying not to shift the tempo too much. That's something that's very easily, a risk, and it's always a risk in Beethoven's music, because he always has these very contrasting elements where we want to slow down when it gets a bit romantic, and we want to speed up whenever it goes a bit more aggressive, right? And that's something to really avoid at all costs. And what helps with that, it's actually to practice it with a lot of emotion. So like exactly how you would play it, but with a metronome. Not always, but do that from time to time. What I'm talking about, after you know the piece and you can really play it from the beginning to the end, or like one movement or something. That helped me, like, really just sometimes keep in mind that here I'm really starting to slow down a lot. You can always allow yourself some shifts, but I think when it becomes like too slow and too fast in the same movement in this kind of music, we start to lose the energy of the piece, and to kind of get lost very easily. So that's I think a trap to avoid. That's it. That's about it. What else can I say about this first movement? So technically, I don't know about you, but I think that it actually starts to get really difficult in this in this sonata, when you have fugues coming in, actually, basically, and also like these trills with a note on top of it. But that's even okay. It's like, that's totally fine. So I think the most important, I would really start by trying to understand all the fugue parts, because that's where it goes a bit crazy and challenging most of the time. One thing that I would say in general is, like, whatever edition you use and whatever fingering you can find on it, just don't think you have to use it. I think that's very important. I'm sure you don't do that, but I think it's very important to say, because I had this girl coming, this student, and she was just doing whatever was written, and even when it totally didn't make sense for her, and was totally complicating her life, like, wow, like how can you even play with this shitty fingering, so just be aware and careful about this, and try, when you feel that what's written is not comfortable, it's only an indication by people who sometimes maybe just play it very slowly and try to, it's a proposition, suggestion, so don't take it à la lettre, how we say in French. Don't take it too seriously sometimes. Yeah. So this is one other thing. Yeah, I talked about the legato before, especially in these movements, and it goes really more and more important. It's kind of easy when you have only two voices, but for instance, after the re-exposition, so like after the fugato, after you went all this part of fugato, you have like a double bar, and then it comes back, the theme comes back, you have this, and after this, like the ninth measure, the ninth bar, at tempo, you have this. You have four voices of legatissimo, and you have to practice this kind of parts without the pedal and trying to play the as legato as you can without the pedal. And that's also one thing. Yeah, that's one of the things to be really, really careful throughout this piece. In piano playing in general, but especially here, it's really, the pedal is important here. And sometimes Beethoven, especially in the beginning of this sonata, he puts a very long pedal over the four first bars, which is totally fine, because that's, gives you the sound that it needs to have. But it's like when it gets very fugue-y, really avoid the pedal as much as you can. Otherwise, we just don't understand anything anymore. And it's sometimes like an easy way to, it's easier actually when you play with a lot of pedal, especially in this piece. But try not to do that overly, and always think about it in a very strategic way. Do I really need the pedal here, like for the sound? That's one way to use it, especially for the beginning. I cannot play, and you cannot play like this. So I need this kind of resonance. That's very important. But here, for instance, I don't need any pedal actually. So practice that like with your fingers. Try to do as legato as possible with your fingers. Same thing with all the other, the big thing. Just keep that in mind, that pedal should be used only for effect, or like really when it's written legato and you need this legato, and you really cannot do it with your hands. It's really impossible. That's the two only exceptions, to use the pedal, and should help, not be part of the notes, I think. Yeah, so that's one other thing. That's more or less it for the first movement. Okay, let's move on to the second movement. Second movement, it's a totally other character than the three other movements in this sonata. And I think, Beethoven was sometimes very dramatic, especially like if you read his Testament of Heiligenstadt, for instance, he wanted to kill himself, but didn't, because he knew that he had a mission on earth, because he was very important, and which, was true. Anyways, he was dramatic sometimes, but if you read his letters, I actually totally encourage you to go and find, I have at home a French version of all his letters. I'm sure you can find that in English, or maybe even in Indonesian. It gives you an overview of who the guy was, and that, he was laughing all the time, like literally, and super goofy sometimes, like, really not just like super serious and like dead before being dead, not at all. It's he was really a fun guy, and he loved to, sometimes he wrote letters to his friends, and he would just put, like write with his hand like 5 lines, music staff like that, and just write some very silly lyrics with a terrible melody, just as a joke, so this kind, and I think this kind of Beethoven humor is still there even when he's been very serious, you know. It's always this joie de vivre, you say in French. This how do you say that? Joie de vivre in English, you know, just happy to be alive. And this is something I think you can find in the second movement that for me, of course, it's hectic. It's not funny. It's not a funny piece, of course. But it's definitely more leggero. It has to be leggero. And I think this leggero, we really find it in the tempo that he wanted. So that's extremely fast too. We're at 80, so that's super fast, you know, and I think that's not something that he wanted, you know, you have to play it exactly at this tempo. It's more like you have to keep it moving forward, and it has to be a bit like, I don't really have time to breathe. I feel it like that. That's a totally personal interpretation of mine. But I think like especially with this crescendo, diminuendo, these small indications in this movement, I feel like it's, you know, his way of being very visual and say, you know, you have this thing. And then, yes, like this time that's enlarges in the trio, you know, again, to create this kind of extreme contrast that we find very often with Beethoven. And yeah, we talked before, when I talked about the whole piece, about this, like this, you know, or this, sorry, you know, and this. I think these are two elements that are, you know, this element. This element is kind of cut every time you're interrupted, like your thoughts are interrupted by every time that, you know? And then same after, yeah. And then, you know, it's always this thing that cuts and comes and interrupts you. And yeah, that's how I see it. And I think this helps you also, you know, make a bit sense of all this. Okay, let's listen to the second movement, if you will. Let's do that now. Voila.
Great. So fast. And so, yeah, so brisk.
Yes, that's
Quite a
important.
balance, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I listened to myself in this piece. Like I think so. Something I do a bit differently now. It's kind of the trio part where I really try to find something more somber. Like really kind of shadowish sound. Something very like more like. More mysterious. I think that's a nice contrast with something very active before and after. But apart from that, I think it was good. It's always funny to listen to yourself years later. Like, you change all the time. Yeah. So actually, that's about it in this one. We shouldn't overthink it. It's like for me, it's kind of like a pause. A nice pause for you, for your mind when you play this whole sonata. You really can have some fun here. Yeah, so let's go.
Intermezzo, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly, something like that. Yeah, but it's so nice. It's perfect. Without this, I think this piece would be super like depressing in a good
heavy
way. Well, yeah, third movement definitely very deep. I think really one of the deepest musics of Beethoven. I think even if you consider the symphonies, this movement, it's really, I think, the depth, the very bottom of the depth of Beethoven's mind. It's really goes very much into his most intimate self. Yeah, and as I said before, there's this indication of 92 per 8, which is like 1, 2, 3. So it's like more or less, which becomes impossibly fast later, like when it's played. Become some kind of like waltz. If you're not too careful, and it's too fast for sure, like for a lot of passages in this movement. But still, it's an indication that you shouldn't play it like some pianists, that I appreciate, but I think are making the wrong choice. Some very famous one, yeah, by the way, and old and guys mostly, and they go like super like. I don't think this is the kind of tempo we should. Okay, just to be clear on that. And I think if you listen to this theme, it's still, as we said before, it's about like being a bit tortured, and also it's appassionato e con molto sentimento. So it's passionate with a lot of sentiment. So I don't think you can achieve that with something too slow that stops itself and becomes totally contemplative. Because it's like when we talk. If you're being passionate, your blood goes faster. And you're passionate, and it cannot be like stopped. That's very important. And yeah, also taking a good tempo will also help you get the direction, which is where I'm going to. And now, because that's the most important in this piece, not to get lost in this movement. And that's also a job that you can do, a work that you can do before, as we said before, as a conductor, just try to hear this music in your mind and know exactly, okay, how long can I make this phrase go on for? The longer the better. And then you try to find really, where do I want to go here, for instance. You go, and then it's not finished. Not finished. stopping actually. Actually, here is the where you want to go. And you go back from here until you reach a different. That's something else. And you go back on Earth. Okay, so this is like how I would do this. I really try to move forward to a culminating point for as long as possible, because it's not da 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 da. Actually, yeah, what helps is just not to look at the phrases, you know, the links that Beethoven puts, because that's only an indication inside the big sentence, you know, because if you stop at the end as he does, that would sound like this, you know. Becomes a bit repetitive, yeah. So it's very important to keep these long sentences in mind and try to analyze that by yourself also for the rest of the piece, and that's very important. And here we have actually the perfect example of what I was talking about, you know, heaven and earth, or like sky and earth, you know, with this really, this almost Faustian, you know, Faust, if you ever read Faust, that's the same kind of, for me, and it's kind of the same kind of philosophy where there's somebody who's thinking a lot and knows everything, but not the meaning of life, basically. So it's like on Earth. It's like a glimpse of hope, or a glimpse of, you know, just like a shadow just uncovered the sky or something. Yeah, this is typically one of these moments where you have, you know, trying to go to the sky, and you can actually see it in the how it's constructed. So the first time it goes, and then it goes back, and it struggles again. And now we go again to the sky, but higher. You know, so every time you try to reach a higher point, but then you fall back. Okay. And I think this feeling is very important when you play this. You just have to feel really this struggle. You know, I try to reach for something, and I'm human, so I just fall back on earth. So depressing, as I said. And yeah, and then that's like for this first theme, and then the second theme is actually the same. It's like, you know, that's the beginning, and then now, so it's cut from the same cloth, but of course it develops, and which is what is very funny in this is that, you know, Chopin was not a big fan of Beethoven and kind of said to many people that he hated him. But in this part, you can actually hear some Chopin. You know, it's really this Dante, the Appoggiato. It's exactly from here. And I actually heard a lot of pieces of Chopin where I kind of found some exact passages of Beethoven. That's just Doesn't mean that the two had anything to do with each other, but it's just funny. I love Chopin too, but it's just another story. Anyway, so like, you know, in this dentelle that I just said, this spitze, how do you say that? Lace, you know, dentelle in French, in English, that's lace, like a lace dress, you know. That's what Chopin was like, lace. And this kind of arpeggiato is exactly the same. And to play this beautifully and with sense, you need this direction we were talking about in the beginning. So here. Like try to really make it never stop. It's like one breathing, you know, your breathing should never stop. And in this movement especially, but music in general, again, you know, the breathing should not stop. It's always like this cycle and comes back. Okay, that's one thing. What else can I talk about? Yeah, for instance, here, where we come afterwards, here. You know, this kind of going up, which we'll also find later in this movement, it's important to keep the tension in your sound. The tension is also found by a very structured idea of where you want to go. So like the direction, again, you know, it helps. But you know what I mean? What I mean is that, you know, don't lose the tension by doing something like that. Just repeat the notes, you know, try to do that. Okay, something like this. And then when you come back, always like, as in all Beethoven, really contrast. Don't be between two ideas. Like what? Etc. Okay, so be very clear when you have like a new elements now, and especially when you have like a crescendo and piano, always piano subito. That's like a rule in Beethoven, but it's important to repeat it here. Depending on the additions, again, you know, there are some notes that differ. Maybe if you don't have Händler, it's possible that, you know, if you listen to my recording, there's some notes that appear very strange. It's just a question of addition. Sometimes I make the choice to follow another one just to try out, you know, but yeah, depends on your edition, but it should always make sense. Maybe they're in addition, here it's an edition Peters from, yeah, actually with Peters, they don't really redo them. So it's kind of like old editions that they just, you know, try to print in a different paper or something. But I mean, in general, I'm not so fond of Peters, edition Peters, because it's less war text than Händler. And what's funny is that, you know, sometimes both say we're war text and they have different texts. And yeah, just be kind of careful with this, because like, especially in the fugue or some places, you know, it always has to make sense. You know, it's always like, or because sometimes you can really create a surprise if you play another note. Yeah, but that's something you will do with Christine's. And yeah, just to mention it. Okay, what about we listen to this third movement? I think until I would say, okay, maybe I will say stop. What do you think about that, Christine?
All right, okay, let's listen to it.
Perfect. It goes on. Again, I remember now that I chose, a sound that was more full, like this, like full, and to create this kind of intensity. But that's also a choice. We can totally also choose. What I do probably now, it's to choose something a little bit darker, a sound that goes a little bit more into, like it's covered by some kind of shadow, and it's a choice. I mean, but in general, I think whatever you choose, this intensity that I talked about should not be lost. That's probably the most important part of this. Yeah, it's almost like an étude de son, like an exercise of sound. This movement, for sure. Yeah, here you have like a very good example of this like heaven and earth thing. Every time you have this. Here you really have like this human voice, downstairs, really on earth, and then this response from something higher. And yeah, that's a perfect example of this in this movement. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, for this movement. Yes. Okay, let's move on. Don't have that much time left. Yeah, the largo from the fourth movement. That's a very interesting thing. It should sound like some kind of waking up from a dream, I think. And what I see in it, but that's totally personal. I don't think that anybody else has told me they think the same. But anyway, since it's what I think, I will just share it. You have this whole very dreamy part where you start like this. Really don't know where you go, and then still don't know. You think you know? No. It's really just totally, you have no idea where you're going, and you hear some kind of voices, maybe from the angels, or from, I don't know, it's like some voices from very far. Again, you don't know where you go, and then, with the allegro, you kind of have this like, I feel it's like, it's like a landscape, really, like it's weather, basically. You have something, you don't know what's happening, you have a lot of fog, and then you think you see a little bit of shine, of sunshine coming out from the clouds, as I said before, and then maybe suddenly, some a little storm like this, and then again it comes down. And then what I see, like at the end of all this part, when you have the tempo after the allegro, this one. I see it as a huge laughter, like it's somebody who's laughing so much that he cannot stop anymore until it explodes. Like something like this, because this rhythm is so special, and for me it's really like it sounds like this, and I don't know, it inspires me to think of it like this. So all that to just to kind of put out there what I think about this largo. But of course you can put other words or other images on on it, or no words and no images, as you wish. So let's move on into the big part of the story, which is the famous food. As I said before, these two elements, I just start with the idea that you already did the work of, just knowing where every where that starts every time. One other thing, it's I think it's important here too to keep in mind the overall direction of where you go with this very interminable, unending theme, right? You go until here, right? And that helps to really do what Beethoven wrote, which is like a huge crescendo on it. So like you cannot, please don't try not to play it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Please don't do this because it's very easy to do this. So of course, when you practice this piece, it can get pretty mechanical because it's just impossible otherwise. But try to always keep in mind, every time when you practice like very mechanical, always try to at the end of a very mechanical session, let's say, of practicing, just have fun and play it not in tempo if you cannot. You can play it slower, but still with intention, and that's very important. Like at the end of every mechanical session, so that you don't lose the meaning of what you're doing. You're not supposed to just type. We're not typists. We're not assistants. We have to make music. Right? That being said, I think the music is found by the amazing polyphony of this piece. So I don't think it's something to overthink. I think it's simply like, I don't find the word anymore in English. It's like a declaration of Beethoven to say, okay, I'm writing a symphony for piano solo. That's how I understand this movement. And that's the magic of it also. And in that sense, we should just, musically, I think it makes sense to just look at it as an amazing fugue for orchestra or string quartet. Maybe that's also possible to see it like this. It's just like something very polyphonic. And in my opinion, every polyphonic piece, like strictly polyphonic piece, like sometimes Bach, of course, but also like more modern, whenever it becomes very polyphonic and fugue-like, it should remain as simple as possible, because the more voices you have and the better the polyphony is written, like it's the case here, the more informations you have to digest and to make people comprehend at the same time. So if you get too complicated with your tempies, like changes of tempies, or like pedal, or I don't know, you can do like, I don't know, crescendo out of nowhere, diminuendo out of nowhere. Like when it's not very clear, then we basically don't understand anything anymore. And I think the focus point for this movement, when you practice it, it's really the clarity, and never try to see it as chords, even when it goes like later on, like when it goes very busy. Okay, there's so many examples. Well, we will listen to it, maybe that will make more sense, and I will tell you where afterwards. Yeah, the more busy it gets, the more you should think it horizontally, not vertically. Really, like, I have all these voices going all together, and that keeps you, at least it helps me keep my head very clear about how it should sound. Yeah. And the result is clearer as well. So why don't we listen to it now, Christine? Then I can develop a little bit more before the questions, eventual question session.
Brava,
What?
bravissima.
Thank you, thank you. It's this actually it's maybe weird when I say it like this, but I think it's actually the easiest movement of the four. Like at least in an understanding wise, because you don't have so many options. It's all about the clarity of the polyphony. And I think like for me, the most important in this movement is really to have fun when you play it, because otherwise it sounds really studious and it's not very sexy, I would say. It's like, because actually I still hear like kind of a lot of, unfortunately, some versions, let's say, that really go like, it's so difficult. It's so difficult. And it's, well, I think that music should never sound difficult. If it's too difficult for you, you should just play something else, I think. But I mean, you can also take a slower tempo and make it sound like you're really enjoying every note. And I think that's the only like really musical thing we can do in these movements, apart of course from the sounds, the pedal, also of course like when to put it, how to put it, and the direction. But apart from that, I don't think there's much more to do apart from really having fun. I don't know what you think about it, Christine, but I think that's the most helpful, at least for me, in this movement. And every time I'm just thinking about, oh, I'm going to have so much fun, I think, I also think that, this fourth movement is kind of the contrast. We were talking about two contrasts, and in this case, it's like two movements that totally contrast each other personality-wise. It's almost schizophrenic. You have like a totally depressing, deep third movement, and then that goes into like this laughing. It's kind of like a huge like ode to something. Yeah, actually, some parts you can actually find the polyphony that you also find in the fourth movement of the Ninth Symphony. In the orchestral parts, and it's very similar. It's really this ecstasy of just so happy to be alive, and I think that's very important to keep in mind when you play this, and not that it becomes like, piano is so difficult. Oh my god, it's so painful, and it should never be like this. I
think that's what haunts most pianists, to play this piece or to shy away because of how it sounds in most recording. The fugue, the last movement sounds so difficult. But when you play it, yes, you make it very clear and light touch and sounds quite simple. So we can follow along. Yeah.
I think it should. And I think that also that's totally achievable. It's not technique, I think, it's really how you are seeing this piece, how you're hearing it in the first place, and what you want to hear out of this music. Because I mean, it's so easy actually when you see many notes, because I know it, when you see something like that, for instance, and you're like, oh wow, it's just so much, and then you tend to start even looking and practicing at this piece like it looks, like just a lot. It's just so much, and I think that's something that you can hear in your music after. So like I think that's something that can totally be remedied for anybody if you just take it really one little, very little step at a time, like maybe today you will only work just on the left hand in the beginning, just with the theme, and that's enough. Once you get that totally comfortable, you move on to something else, and not the whole piece, and then you get frustrated because it doesn't work right away, because it cannot. We're human, I believe that no human, even Liszt, when he practiced this, I'm sure he did it step by step, and very gradually. And it's normal. It's supposed to be like this. It's not a piece that was written, that was improvised by Beethoven. Definitely not. So it's not supposed to I think the only way to make something sound simple is really to just build it up so that it stays simple. Like, for instance, when you take a tempo like, I don't know, for instance, very slow. It cannot not be simple, right? You cannot not play it. Even in the most difficult parts, it's I don't know. melodic, something like that. You don't force it. It remains simple, okay? And once you're totally comfortable with this kind of tempo, when you hear everything perfectly, you know where you want to go, you hear like the beginning of every voice, you know how it goes with each other, how the harmony changes because of the polyphony, and you follow that emotionally, you know, once you do that, and you do that really gradually, step by step, faster, and step by step you go further in the piece, you know, there's no reason that it doesn't work, that it sounds difficult at the end, you know, because you did this gradual work. That's, yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think of as like a method of achieving something, you know, simple with difficult pieces. I don't know about you. I don't know what you think about this, but it works for me at least. I hope it can work for others too.
Yeah, you shared such a great tip in how to see this piece as a whole, how to approach all what people think is difficult, and how to break down in a very simple, you know, break it down to slow tempo, see it in a different way. I think that's really great what you share with us tonight. Thank you so much, Mélodie. You did such a great job. I mean, congratulations on, you know, recording this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But changing a lot, you know, like in some
of course,
ideas.
we all, yeah. That means we improve if we change. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Or whatever, you know, you just accept that you can have different ideas, and that's totally fine. You know, a different life, and that's good actually.
Yeah.
Imagine if you didn't evolve in your life, like musically or humanly or ever, you know, just remain this like 19 years old. It would be so in that case. Yeah,
that's great. Any questions so far about how Beethoven composed this piece, perhaps during his lifetime? Was, of course, we know that he's always not satisfied with the instrument, but maybe you could share a little bit about the instrument that he had during this time. I know we know the lowest is still F, yeah. I think in the middle, I think the fourth movement is when he received this piano broadwood. I'm not sure if he changed anything to fit into that. If you know anything about it, before he composed the last movement of this piece, 106.
Oh yeah, it's very possible. I know that, you know, when he started, because I think he took something like almost 2 years to really achieve, which is a long time for Beethoven. When you think about like what people did over in the past, you know, all that they achieved, they were so productive without smartphones or anything. Like, it's quite incredible. Anyways, yeah, so it was quite a long period of time, and like during the, I don't want to say, I'm not a musicologist, so I don't know details, you know, I just read the letters of Beethoven about it, and some infos like this, and I know that, you know, like, actually he started composing the ideas when this new Hammerklavier was not out yet. So he had these ideas to and there was already improvements every 2-3 years, actually, quite kind of just gradual improvements on the piano that he had over there. That was also kind of a Hammerklavier, but didn't have the name, didn't bear the name. It was but the same mechanism, but less good, let's say. And it didn't have, I don't know how to say this, the double échappement, you say the
double
you know,
escapement, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The double escapements, and that's the biggest difference, if I remember well. Well, that made the whole difference between the piano he had before and after this new Hammerklavier from Erard. That, you know, he was able to actually express much more layers of expression, just basically, you know, with this double échappement, and also the keys would also repeat faster, and yeah,
more strength,
more
sound,
strength, all this, yeah. So definitely, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's again that's.
But it's also, you know, heavier, which is he's not used to it.
Yeah, totally heavier. Actually, when we play like pianoforte from before, it's really like touching nothing. Like I played once or twice. I had the chance to even play on the piano, the piano of Mozart, or one of the pianos of Mozart, that was at Paul Badura Skoda's place. You know, he has it at home. He was very proud of it, and I was allowed, you know, to play a little the beginning of the first movement of the first sonata of Beethoven. and really seriously, it was like I couldn't play on it because it was so crispy already. Like not in the like the wood was so crispy, and then I just started to play a little bit normally, and I heard like like all kinds of noises. I'm like, my God, I'm not going to, I cannot pay that like over a lifetime. I think that's like way too expensive. So yeah, I think it's a totally new, I think, yeah, the biggest change, the biggest difference between before and after the hammer clavier, it's the whole technique of playing, of composing for piano, you know, like that allowed all these composers right after, like Mendelssohn
That's
or
right.
and Liszt, to really suddenly move forward. There was like a big boom of piano technique suddenly, and it really came from the new piano because it was kind of unachievable or very difficultly achievable before, and it wouldn't think about playing piano that way because I just didn't know what they had. So it went even further. The Liszt really, you know, composed some pieces for the Bösendorfer, and the moment had they still have this imperial, you know, this imperial Bösendorfer that goes, I think, 8 keys lower than the lowest A that we have, which I think, okay, it's not, doesn't change that much, but I mean, he actually composed some stuff where you actually just touch one of these keys, you know, these black keys, because they are all painted in black, and it's very funny. And what's funny is that nowadays you still have some old pianos that don't have some of the highest key ups at the A also. That's, I'm like, yeah, where's progress? But anyways,
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mélodie, for sharing with us today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, especially on Sundays, and to walk us through and to share your tips and how you see this piece as a whole. So I hope this gives you a better look of this piece.